Good evening, intuitives. I know it's been a week and a half when I usually don't go this long without posting a video, but here I am on St. Patrick's Day, and happy St. Patrick's Day. I am half Irish, but I'm not Catholic, so, you know, ironic enough, I'm wearing green, although if certain members of my father's family were still alive, they would prefer that I'd be wearing black. Yeah, they were from county court. You draw your own conclusions with that. But the past week and a half's been busier than normal because I'm back to working two jobs because it's now spring and golf courses are open again. So that's one of my two jobs that wasn't going on in January and February. And more importantly, I'm in the middle of depositions, which are a blast. There's a lot of prep work that goes into them. It's not fun to be the one being deposed either. I've already had that experience as well, but I'm not going to get into that. Going to get into something, I haven't done this in a little bit, an INFJ video, and it's something that's been very dear to me my whole life. And I'm going to talk about the INFJ's love of books, and I think this applies to ENFJs too, so I'm going to include you on this because, again, anecdotal evidence, but it seems like ENFJs like to read as much as we do. So, why are books so important to INFJs? Well, like most things, there's many different reasons. For when it comes to INFJs and ENFJs, we like to know things. We like to know facts. We like to be able to prove our point for something based on facts. We, like to make a strong, cohesive argument because we hate when people claim that they know things based on I just know, which seems to mostly be a baby boomer thing, at least certainly amongst baby boomers in Chester County, but a lot of them act as if they weren't born, they descended from Mount Olympus. It's a different topic. So, reading. I've always preferred to read or listen because now in this era I'm heavily into audiobooks more because you can listen to them in the car or on a plane. And whereas it's a bitch to try to read a book in a car, especially if you drive a stick shift like me. If you're good at doing that, then that's pretty badass. But audiobooks are how I consume most of my books these days because I don't have as much free time as I'd like, and I can listen on the way to work and on the way home from work, and there's an hour of getting into an audiobook that I've been meaning to get into. But INFJs and ENFJs, we always want to know more about things that interest us. I mean, speaking anecdotally from my own childhood, I was always a history nerd, which is a big part of the reason why I've always wanted to live in London. There's a lot of history there that I read about as a child, and not to mention the British Museum that I've dreamt of going to since I was 6 years old, mostly for the Egyptology section. But again, I'm not going to get off on a sidetrack. Even as a kid, I, would grow up reading things like National Geographic and other like publications, because this is showing my age here, but this was in the 90s, so there was no YouTube or on demand or, anything to just have to be able to view a subject in real time whenever you feel like it via internet or digital cable or anything. We're talking the mid 90s. The internet was in its infancy at the time, at least for the general public. So if you saw an article of something you were interested in a magazine, you had to go find a book about it, which I often did. And that's why to this day I have so many books. That was the vast majority of my storage space in my apartment in Arlington was boxes of books. It was quite the makeshift library. Not that impressive because it was boxes and a storage locker, but if I actually had nice bookcases, it would probably fill the walls of my apartment, and that would be impressive because one should always have, more books than TVs, or well, people may have a couple TVs, but you should log in more hours into reading or listening to audiobooks than you do in front of the TV. Now, yeah, some TV, there's documentaries and stuff. We're not talking about that. We're talking about like mindless garbage, like The Bachelor, which is fake and stupid. It's just what a crock. I don't know, I find it funny. But anyway, wanting to learn things is a big part of who INFJs and ENFJs are. It goes to our authenticity, and we like to speak about things that interest us, but at the same time, we want to actually know what the hell we're talking about. And also, INFJs and ENFJs do a lot of self-reflection. So, a lot of times we'll be reading stuff, searching for answers to better ourselves or answer questions about ourselves and why we're not like the majority of other people, because intuitives, we're our own thing compared to sensors. And this is even rings more true for INFJs, because an ENFJ probably be more comfortable talking to somebody about it as opposed to us introverted INFJs. They're like, I'm so weird, I'm so different than everybody else. Maybe the answer's in a book. Let me go read a bunch of books and see if I can find the answer all on my own. Must not speak to self. As to quote Lisa Simpson, I'll be an outcast. More so. So she's one of our INFJs. I love Lisa Simpson. I've often described my childhood as picture a male version of Lisa Simpson, because my father was very much like Homer Simpson, right down to his physique, drinking habits, and even job. But we'll do another video on that. So, always wanting to know things and seeking credible answers is a big part of why INFJs and ENFJs are drawn to books. Again, things that interest us, we always want to know more about them. And also, and this is, anecdotally for me, this is to a lesser extent, but a sense of escapism. I'm not really big into fiction. I read a lot of history books and recently a lot of psychology books, particularly Carl Jung. I haven't really read a fiction book in a long time. And of course, being a witch, I read a lot of witchcraft books. I have a few dozen of them, but it's not my entire library by any means. So escapism can be part of it too, especially knowingly or unknowingly. And it's knowingly now for me, but I didn't know it obviously growing up, that INFJs and ENFJs, given that we're so rare amongst the general public, will gravitate toward books that center around INFJ and ENFJ characters, because, sometimes if the book is popular, the character will remind those that know us well of us, even though they don't know the whole MBTI thing. They'll be like, hey, you should check this out. This person reminds me of you. Like I heard for 2 fucking years about Game of Thrones and Jon Snow. It's like, fuck, I'm tired of hearing about this guy. It's like, oh, this guy reminds me of you. I'm like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't like fantasy. I don't want to hear it. But I ended up watching the show anyway. It was right on the border between, the kind of fantasy that I can watch and enjoy and what I can't. Never got into Harry Potter, never got into Lord of the Rings. That's too fantastical for me. Low fantasy good, high fantasy bad for me personally, and that's how it's always been. Game of Thrones good, X-Files good, Grimm good, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, it's like, nah, that's too far. Yeah, so, Last Kingdom good. Well, that's semi-historically based, but that's how I got some people to read some books on the Dark Ages. Interesting time. Very dark. Thanks, Christian Church. If the pagans were left to run society, things would be more advanced. And I'm not saying in a pagan society, back then that women would be equal, but they would certainly be more equal than in the Dark Age Christian society where you were more or less property. Very sickening. I don't really like to see that portrayed on TV. It makes me angry. And of course, all the pagan bashing and them killing us for not accepting, a God that we don't feel connected to. It's especially ironic now, to me. I'm going off on one of my sidetracks as I do. If you've watched my videos, I know not many of you watch because I'm a nobody in front of a tablet with a cheap headset on. But, nonetheless, I'm a little entertaining and I speak what's on my mind, and it wanders because I'm an INFJ at times. But I always found it interesting when people try to browbeat pagans into being Christians and use the whole tradition thing. It's like, If you're of European descent, at some point your ancestors were pagan. Paganism came before Christianity. Like, we'll take an example, just as an example, if someone who is British is, connected to the god Woden, and they're trying to be browbeaten into accepting the Christian god. It's like, tradition ain't a good argument. Woden was around in those on those islands long before, the god of Christianity was imported to that island. And technically, if you want to talk about traditions, then maybe the Jewish community should browbeat the Christians, because Christianity is supposed to be the fulfillment of Judaism, or at least a reformation of Second Temple rabbinical Judaism. That's kind of didn't go the way as planned, at least not today. It's been weaponized. Again, I'm not insulting anybody who believes in Christianity. I'm pointing out that, in my opinion, some popular leaders of that faith are disingenuous and simply using that message to seek fame and fortune. And to me, they're no better than David Miscavige of Scientology. And yes, Kenneth Copeland, I mean you. What a snake. So, just my little bit. I would suggest that anybody in any religion read books on the topic and draw your own conclusions. Religion in general of any faith is allegorical. So what does that allegory mean to you? You're just as competent to take your own meaning from it as opposed to whatever your parents tell you it means, and don't blindly follow tradition just for the sake of tradition. Like me as a kid. Why am I not supposed to eat meat on Friday? That's what Catholics do. Why? Oh, just do it. That doesn't make any sense. And that's an argument I remember at 7. And I'm using that as an example to say, if you're going to try to recommend somebody follow a specific tradition, religious or not, it's a good reason to read. Because if you're going to tell somebody this is important and you should follow it, you should at least know why it's important, and not, tradition for tradition's sake, because that's what Chestertologists do. And those you don't know, it's what I call like this inner group of know-it-all baby boomers who have lived their whole life in Chester County and view the outside. They live in a bubble, and I refer to that bubble as Chestertology, as a mixture of Chester County and Scientology, because they're very cultish and fascistic. So, my own little word. It's mine. You can't have it. You can use it, but you can't have it. It's mine. But now that I've done my traditional sidetrack in a video, I'll get back to my point. So books for INFJs and ENFJs, give us a sense of security too. It allows us to exercise our minds, because especially in the modern day, intelligence, intuition, and wanting to be someone who knows things is frankly looked down upon. Attention spans are short, and it's all about image and clicks and likes. But you should like this video and subscribe to this channel anyway, because you like it, not because it's popular, because it certainly isn't. And that's fine, because it's not why it exists. But we like to know things, and books are, as I mentioned before, not only escapism into a more idealistic world. You could explain why I've been so connected to Plato's Atlantis since I was a young child. And I just got the audiobook of Ignatius Donnelly, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. It's quite long, but I've skimmed through it before, but I always wanted to hear that whole story, because I like Atlantis. Because it was, the idea of Atlantis, whether it was ever real or not, was written by Plato, who was an idealist because he was an INFJ as well. Funny how I'm drawn to that, as I said. So books provide INFJs and ENFJs a way to not only seek further knowledge about topics that interest us and allow us to, be able to have information to correctly give our point, give our arguments if need be. That's why I read a lot of political books. But, can also help us better understand ourselves and seek information from older, wiser, like-minded people, and also you can come to that realization like, wow, there's other people out there that think like me. They're long dead, because if you're reading, classics like Plato, that's the case. But it helps you realize you're not the only one, which is really quite comforting, because I thought I was the only one growing up, at least the only male. There were no other males like me in Chester County in my school, not a one. But I digress from that. So remember, as INFJs and ENFJs, reading and learning is a big part of who we are. It's something we're drawn to all our lives. Don't ever be ashamed of how much you read, or that you find reading or listening to audiobooks more entertaining than whatever mindless blather is on TV. And I'm not saying there isn't quality stuff on TV, both educational documentary stuff and, well written, well acted fiction. I mean, Game of Thrones is a good example. I really enjoyed its Shakespearean esque script, except for those last season. But how it was more of a play than just something on TV. Where the fuck am I going with this? It wasn't something like just like mindless cheap laughs, or like a cash grab. You watch some things on TV and it gets popular because a lot of money was thrown at it and it was hyped up, and it's like, this is crap. This is stupid. There's nothing like, I can't use my brain at all. Half the fun for INFJs watching TV a lot of the times is trying to predict where the plot's going and trying to guess the lines of the actors. And we do it in books too. We guess, where a plot's going, and then we're all proud of ourselves when we figure out plot twists, because that's what intuitives do, and it freaks people out. It's fun. They think we're clairvoyant. Some INFJs in the past have used their intuition to a point where they were able to convince people they were clairvoyant. And no, it's introverted intuition that goes in the back of your mind, but without you knowing, it's really not well understood. And you should read some Carl Jung books if you better want to understand it. But even he, who was also an INFJ, didn't really understand it that well. Interesting. So, never be ashamed of how much you read, or that you prefer reading in any topic that you enjoy, be it educational, fantasy, historical, whatever, as compared to what's ever popular on TV. And also, read about what you're interested in. Don't worry about like what books are popular if they don't call to you, or what's on the New York Times bestseller list, because a lot of that is not on the up and up either, and there's backroom deals and good old boy shit. And, if you think I'm full of shit, then how about this for a little bit of information? Do you know what the number one book on the New York Times bestseller list is of all times? No? What? It's Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard. So that should tell you something, about what the New York Times bestseller list is. Not that there's not good books on it, but something being a New York Times bestseller doesn't, by definition, make it good. Popular doesn't equal good. Try explaining that to other teenagers when you're in high school and it doesn't go very well, but nonetheless, popular does not equal good. Something can be popular and crap at the same time. I find that funny. But anyway, reading is a big part of who we are as INFJs and ENFJs. You're always going to want to read. You're always going to find new topics you're interested in, and that little snippet of information on a documentary or in a magazine or on a TV show is not going to satisfy your curiosity, and you're going to want to do a deep dive into that topic. I've been doing it my whole life, and I assume it's going to continue. And also, we are drawn to other people who enjoy reading as much as we do. It's something very important to us. INFJ or an ENFJ is going to have a hard time being like in a relationship with someone who's like, I don't read at all. It's like, I just believe what like TV tells me. I don't need to read, like I don't need to understand the political process. I have Sean Hannity and the rest of Fox News. It's like, yeah. So stuff like that. And that's another important part of reading for INFJs and ENFJs. Seek the knowledge yourself. Find out, the true facts, the statistics, find out what the people perhaps that were, whatever, if you're searching a certain event, find out, what the contemporary sources say about that. Don't believe some talking head who has an agenda. Find the information for yourself. Yes, I'm speaking about political books now. Read Listen Liberal by Thomas Frank. If you watched my video on telling the Democrats that it's not 1992 anymore, that book, it's on Audible too, by the way, will give you a deep dive into why Bill Clinton and his cronies in the Democratic Leadership Council were the decline of the Democratic Party and why that abandoned the working class, which eventually led to the rise of Trump. It's a great book. And no, I don't know Thomas Frank, but it's a really, really good book, especially if you were ever curious about why the Democratic Party sold out. And if you're in the UK, you should read it too, because Tony Blair basically followed the same playbook. Like, Tony Blair and New Labour was just like, hey, I want to be like this Bill Clinton guy. He's my idol. He looks at, Tony Blair looks at Bill Clinton the same way David Miscavige looks at Tom Cruise. It's like, that's everything I wish I was. And it led to the destruction of two great countries, especially their middle class and working class, all for their own narcissism and greed. It's a really sad story, and it shows you who the true villains are, and surprise, surprise, baby boomers. More specifically, white male baby boomers. Me, mine. Yeah, I got mine. But this is already getting long, so I'm going to cut it here. So yes, INFJs and ENFJs. It is very common amongst your type to be drawn to books and reading, and to always want to seek more knowledge about topics you're interested in, and in addition be drawn to other people that feel the same and enjoy learning and knowing things as much as you do. I like knowing things. I don't care what anybody says. I've long since stopped caring about what normal people think of me, because they're lazy. They don't like to think. They just do what they're told, like little robot sheeps. But anyway, different video. So thank you for listening to me in this video, even though I guess I'm a little rusty, even though I don't know what I'm doing. But I mean that in the way, because I went off on more sidetracks than even normal. But anyway, you'll be seeing me about every other day from here on, because my busy week and a half is over, at least for a while. I shouldn't have a week as busy as this. You never know. Thanks for watching, and remember, trust your intuition about if you want to learn more about a topic and read up on it. If your intuition's telling you to do it, do it. And don't sell out your integrity or your interest in reading just because it's not popular. Popular changes. Facts don't change. What's popular does.